What is actualized.org? It's such a gargantuan question. I don't even know where to begin. But I guess I could summarize it as this. Actualized.org is a catalog. For those of you who are new, it's a catalog of the most powerful concepts that I have pursued and studied and discovered in my own life in order to make sense of what life and reality are and how to live the best life possible. It's focused specifically on the biggest picture perspective. What you'll find out there, if you're getting into self-help and self-improvement advice, this is a giant field with many subfields, and mostly what you get within all these different subfields are narrow specialists who give you a little bit of advice about this narrow region of your life or that narrow region of your life, whether it's business advice, relationship advice, family advice, career advice, emotional advice, advice about your addiction problems or your weight problems or your money problems or whatever else. And don't get me wrong, all of that is very useful and good. But as I entered into self-help originally, just for myself, not as a teacher or as a coach or as some guru, but just for my own self when I got into it maybe 15 years ago, when I first discovered it, maybe when I first picked up my first Tony Robbins book, it was great. But the problem that I had from the very beginning is that it wasn't holistic enough. It didn't really give me the understanding. The depth was lacking. Nobody brought all the different puzzle pieces together into one cohesive image. Nobody really wanted to understand reality for reality's sake. They were just providing advice for how to satisfy some personal petty need, like money or sex or love or whatever. And those are fine to satisfy those, but I wanted something more. And as I started reading all these different books and learning from all these different teachers, taking courses and workshops and so on, I started encountering various profound concepts, almost like principles by which one could orient his or her life. And I started making notes and writing these down, and I became very enthusiastic about creating a catalog of all of these. And I was amazed that such a catalog basically didn't exist anywhere online. And so my mission, my project became to create this catalog. And so that's what actualize.org is in a nutshell. It's this catalog of hundreds of episodes. Eventually, it's probably going to be thousands of episodes dealing with important principles and concepts for how to live the good life and how to understand how to live the good life. And we cover a very broad range of subtopics and subfields. We cover basic self-improvement advice. We cover some relationship advice. We cover some health advice. We do a lot of psychological work. We cover various fields within psychology, developmental psychology I focus a lot on, but we also look into positive psychology. We take from psychoanalysis and from various therapies within psychology that have been developed. We take and pull useful nuggets from that. We're basically pulling useful nuggets from anywhere that we can find. We pull from philosophy, we pull from epistemology, from metaphysics, from science, from history, from sociology, from anthropology, from systems theory and systems thinking, and basically anything else that is useful to our ultimate objective, which is, what is reality? How do I live the good life? If I've got this one life, which conventionally speaking is what we've got, how do you know what to do with it? See, we both go broad, but we also go deep at the same time. Breadth times depth actually is called scope. So the scope of actualize.org is beyond anything that you'll find anywhere out there as far as these kinds of teachings. Most teachers either have a lot of depth but very narrow breadth, or are very broad, a lot of depth, but not very deep. And we're trying to do both at the same time here. So the core thing you have to understand is that when you were born into a society which is still in the dark ages. Right now, We fancy ourselves as these advanced beings living in the 21st century who have all this fancy technology and know so much about reality. We basically believe we have reality all figured out, except for a few minor details. That's the general notion that is fed to you by society, in school, in university, and just through mainstream media and elsewhere. You just basically are indoctrinated in with this. It's not even a belief per se. It's just sort of a background assumption that grounds your sense of reality. And so we're living in the dark ages, though. We're not that advanced. This is still the dark ages. We know so little about reality. We know less than 1% about reality, less than 1% about how consciousness works, how the human mind works, how to live the good life. We know so little. There's still so much more to discover. We know so little about how to structure our societies and our economies. Society right now, as good as it might seem for some of you, it's very brutal and cruel for many others. And it's filled with deep, deep, deep ignorance and closed-mindedness and misunderstanding. So that's what we're tackling here. One of the core things that will transform your whole life is understanding that the way that most people live their life, all of your friends, family members, teachers, everyone you basically know, that they're living life at 1% of their capacity. And they will never go beyond maybe 2 or 3%. And that's with assuming they will be exceptional and do some basic self-help work, which most people won't even do that. See? So there is a level of depth to life that you can live that is beyond anything that any human has ever taught you or led you to believe is possible. These levels are so profound and so amazing that we could call them superhuman. These are states and levels of consciousness and ways of embodying consciousness and living life that are beyond the human. But this is not conventionally given to you as a possibility when you're growing up. When you're growing up, your culture indoctrinates you into basically accepting all the limitations and standards and norms of whatever culture you grew up in. Some of you are in more developed countries, others of you are in less developed countries, but even in the most developed countries, the standards are still extremely low. And so there's a sort of an artificial glass ceiling that's created on your potential as a human. Because see, when you're born, here's what you got to understand. You don't know anything about life. You don't know what reality is. And basically, you still don't, other than that you think you do because of all the stuff they taught you in school, but really you don't. And you didn't come with an instruction manual. And in a sense, that's what Actualize.org is attempting to do, is to create an instruction manual for life and for reality. But it's much more tricky than you would ever imagine, because it's not just some simple 1, 2, 3 step procedure that can be laid out in a linear order. Everybody just reads the manual, goes through, the first 100 pages and just follows the steps and gets a certain result. It's way more complicated than that. If you think about it, you and I, us humans, we are the most advanced bio-machines that have ever lived on this planet, as far as we know, over the last 4 billion years. We have instruction manuals that come with our refrigerators and our washing machines and our computers. But nobody gave us an instruction manual for how to operate this most sophisticated biomechanical device on the planet. Can you see how that might be a problem? Think of all the problems you can run into with your computer, for example, if you don't know how to operate it. But how much more complex is your brain, your mind, your psychology, and your body than even the most advanced supercomputers today? Way beyond anything a computer can do. This thing is doing every single minute of your life. So the real question is, when you're born into this life, don't assume you understand life or reality, and don't look to others for answers about how to get the mediocre results that they're getting, because everybody around you is basically getting mediocre results in their life. Even if they're successful, they're still getting mediocre results in terms of their internal mood, emotional states, and their consciousness and their psychology. But the real question here is, it's a meta question that you ask. You don't start off life by saying, okay, well, let me just go become a computer programmer, or let me become a doctor, or let me become an engineer, or let me go get married, or let me have a bunch of sex, or let me get a bunch of money, become a businessman on Wall Street. These are all the wrong questions. The first question, the most fundamental question you have to ask is, why am I here? What's going on in the biggest possible picture perspective? What's worthwhile doing and what isn't? What are the traps? And what am I? How does my machine work? If I think of myself as a machine, how do I work? What makes me tick? And so most of your energy should be devoted not externally towards running around and doing crazy stuff in the world and having fun and entertainment and going to parties and getting into relationships and falling in love. No, all of that is distraction. The true core of life, if you want to live a good life, is to turn your gaze inwards and to ask deep, penetrating questions about how to live life and how your machine works. And basically, what I've discovered throughout my 15-year journey or so through self-help and spirituality is that all of our problems stem fundamentally from a lack of mastery of this machine, and specifically of the mind. The mind. The mind, its power is very much underappreciated and underestimated by most people because we live under what's known as the materialist paradigm, where we tend to believe that we're living in a material, objective, three-dimensional world that exists independent of our minds, and that our minds play some role within reality, but a minor role, basically, and that there's not very much that the mind can do to change reality. This is dead wrong. You couldn't be more wrong. This is one of the most pernicious assumptions and latent beliefs that people hold that creates that glass ceiling beyond which they can never grow beyond maybe 1 or 2 or 3% of their true potential as a human. You have to start to see that the way that everybody around you is living their life, including your family members, brothers and sisters and parents, your friends, your teachers, your coworkers, your bosses, the celebrities that you see on television, the YouTubers that you admire on YouTube and elsewhere, Instagram models and so forth, that this is not how to live life. This is all idiocy. These people are not truly tapping into the potential of a human in living life. And ultimately, what do you want in life? What is it you want? You see, because we assume that, well, Leo, it's studying the outer world that's really challenging. Like studying science is hard, studying math is hard, exploring the moon and Mars, outer planets in the solar system. This is difficult stuff. But don't we already know what we want and who we are? These sorts of questions. What use can come from these sorts of questions? They seem very abstract and philosophical and kind of fluffy, airy-fairy, not very tangible. You couldn't be more wrong. You have no idea what you are. On every level. You don't know yourself at the physical level, at the psychological level, at the emotional level, at the spiritual level. You don't really understand your emotional level, at the spiritual level. You don't really understand yourself. And of course, if you think about it, why would you? You were born into this life, but you don't know how